what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, the first round of playoff is in the books, and everyone is mad. Everyone is really mad.
You know, man, I'm glad you decided to address this at the top, because that was my first takeaway, man. Like, watching the Indiana Notre Dame game, I don't understand. Like, guys, I feel like I'm going insane. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like, again, we've said this ad nauseum here. I grew up in college football. I've loved this sport my entire life. I remember LSU's second overtime loss and how gripping and horrible that was, and being like, we're done. Our season's done. We're never going to win anything. And then having 8,000 things go right for us and having the blessing to do that. And now every time a team loses in a 12-team playoff game, it's like, this other team that also they lost their cars and they missed a game, they should be in.
To be fair, we did this in the 4-team.
Yep.
It's nothing new. It's just the amount of teams that feel like they're entitled to do it. And when we had such a blowout-centric first round, wherein, I mean, Texas was the only game that got kind of close, and I am not going to do the thing where I just point to the final score of the Indiana Notre Dame game and say, see, 10-point game, closest game. People are crazy. No,
this is how you guys know Connor is pure, because he has no idea how to be a conference agenda pusher.
He's
like, you know what? This score does not indicate. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Connor, I should have understood this when TCU beat Michigan convincingly and then got to the Natty and people went, they're frauds.
Convincingly, they beat them. They beat them.
Right.
Now, that's the example that I always come back to. But like, we get this first round with all chalk, no upsets, no double-digit seeds advance to the quarterfinal. And in a lot of ways, it was the you don't need to expand argument playing out in year one. I still enjoyed it, even though there were blowouts. I loved the build-up. Friday was such a weird thing to process as an Indiana grad, seeing all of these images, seeing the field in South Bend covered in snow, and thinking that Indiana is about to play in the first college football playoff game, having people asking me throughout the course of the week, what do you think Indiana's going to do? Do you think Indiana can pull off an upset? And I'm sitting here saying no. But just that question in itself, and sitting down with Lauren, ordering a pizza, having a beer, and watching my team play in the college football playoff, weird that was even a thought. And
let me
then
ask you a question real quick. You're the exact guy I need to talk to you about this, okay? Because, and I wasn't even doing the expanded playoff thing, because I am literally a believer in you get what you ask for. All right, so I'm past all of this. I'm not complaining about anything. But let me ask you this question. As an Indiana fan, when we expanded this playoff, I made the example of Iowa. I don't know if you remember this, and I said, look, Iowa's
2015 Iowa, or just Iowa in general?
Iowa loose. Iowa last year, Iowa every other year, when they're just a good Iowa team that will obviously, or not obviously, but ultimately never win a title, right? And I'm like, those Iowa fans, would they rather go to, the Capital One Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, whatever it would be, and all the offensive linemen get to play in the mini games, and they do all that, and maybe they win the game, maybe they don't, but that's the end of their season. If you had a great season, as an Indiana fan, would you have rather go to, I don't know, let's call it not the Rose Bowl, but let's call it the Fiesta Bowl.
Citrus Bowl. Why not Citrus Bowl?
Citrus. I feel like it's above the Citrus Bowl. You know what I'm saying? Like the orange, but like a New Year's 6 good bowl game that Indiana would have normally gotten, and say, hey, either way, this is going to be a great season. Even if you lose this bowl game, your boys had a good time. Do you like the elevated nature of kind of watching your team get roasted for losing, but also having the opportunity to advance? Or would you rather that be a button on a great all-time Indiana season?
See, I might not be the best person for this, because I've said before, look, I am an Indiana grad. Indiana football has never ruined a Saturday for me. Okay?
But you've never gotten roasted over it either.
True. Fair. Very fair.
You have to answer for this. That's why I'm asking you.
And when this is playing out Friday, and everybody is throwing out every single hypothetical of all these 3-loss SEC teams would have had a better game. Yes, they would have. I'm not going to disagree with that. Northern Illinois also had a better game against Notre Dame. Bowling Green had a better game against Penn State than SMU did. So that argument sucks. And I hate that. So like this
Let's
notion,
give UCF that natty if y'all want to work with that logic. The transitive
yeah,
property is what we're doing here.
yeah, and I'll get around to the point that I know you're getting to here, but
Mm-hmm.
like when all of this is playing out, and I'm seeing this discourse all of a sudden of like, see, this is why Indiana didn't deserve a spot, and Herb Street even goes off on Saturday morning about like Indiana got outclassed, they didn't deserve to be there, and I'm not one that's going to sit here and support the decisions that Kurt Signetti made in that game. You can't be the guy that's going to say during the week, we beat the what out of top 25 teams, and then come out and coach like that and punt in situations where you should be going for fourth down. And he pretty much coached like someone that was defeated very early on and knew that he was overmatched in that game. So I'm not going to sit here and defend Indiana or do anything like that. But here's the issue that I have with all this, and I'm going to get to the point that you made, and about like how would you like to finish your season. But what bothers me so much is that when all these hypotheticals get thrown around there about this team, would have had a better showing against that team, blah, 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 and the whole deal, is that I'm of the belief then, everybody who's saying that, surely when Alabama played Oklahoma, you bet the house, the farm, the ranch, the village, you bet it all on Oklahoma to beat Bama money line, right? You did that.
I sure picked Alabama. If that lets you know where the
I said, quote, it was a terrible matchup for Oklahoma, and I do this for a living, and I promise I watch more football than anybody that's saying that on that stupid app, all right? Mm-hmm. And so for people to get up in arms about that and then have this reaction of, oh, see, this is why you shouldn't have done that in the first place, to have people associated with 3-loss teams. And I'm not talking fans for what it's worth. Fans are going to fan.
It's never fans. Fans are a lot more rational than the people who...
Yeah, do what you got to do. That's fine. I have no problem with that. If you're a fan of Ole Miss, if you're a fan of Alabama, South Carolina, Miami.
What if you're the head coach of Ole Miss?
But if you're the head coach of Ole Miss, even Feinbaum, I would disagree with him on this. Okay, and I realize where I'm coming from here. I'm going to come off as the Indiana grad who's saying like, oh, well, Indiana should have just got it let in no matter what. No. I was the guy saying if Indiana loses to Ohio State, they will be firmly on the bubble and they'll need chaos to get in. They got chaos. Mm-hmm. They got into the field. And yes, they got outclassed. And yes, they got beat by Notre Dame. And yes, those teams would have given a better game. Okay, I'm not disagreeing with any of that. But you can't live in hypotheticals. Mm-hmm. And to say that, oh, Ole Miss, their floor is just so much higher. Kentucky at home.
That's the funny thing too. It's like, well, Indiana only beat up on bad teams. So you can tell me beating up on bad teams is easy. So I couldn't Ole Miss do it.
So then all of Ole Miss's losses were good losses then, right? All of Bama's losses were really good losses. No. Here's the problem. People with Bama are associating with the brand. I had people texting me throughout the day, throughout the day on Friday or throughout Friday night and then Saturday when SMU was just getting waxed, and Kevin Jennings probably looked at the crowd and thought, well, that's my team. It's a whiteout, so that this is how this is supposed to work, right? Like I'm you're looking at the wrong colors. It's actually a really smart move by Penn State to have the whiteout. But what's so dumb and is so aggravating to listen to is these fan bases that are of the belief, oh no, our floor is so much higher. We just get to sit here and be like, yep, this game that never would have been played. No, because nobody in their right mind would have predicted that Bama, which was on extra rest, I consider playing against Mercer to be extra rest. Mm-hmm. Nobody in their right mind thought Bama would get waxed by that Oklahoma team. And when you end up 9-3, you're putting yourself in that position. So I didn't really, I wasn't going to get into the Twitter wars with people about that stuff, but it is so weird that so many people watch football, and when the game all of a sudden doesn't become a game and they don't have a rooting interest, it's push the narrative. That's all you root for. We don't do this in any other sport except college football. The college football playoff games that everybody's watching don't turn out to be the way that they are. And it's a selection committee that is just the lowest hanging fruit. It's old. It's just old.
I'm just like, it's boring, I think is my thing. I'm just bored by it. It's like everybody, it's a rage contest. And I feel like one thing I always joke about with my boss is, if there's a direct path to give someone exactly what they ask for, then do it. Right. And it's like, hey, we wanted an expanded playoff, okay? But here's the deal. People their agendas don't line up together. Because if you want these upsets to matter, if you want the goalposts being carried into the river, if you want for instance, Tennessee beating Alabama this year to matter, okay, then you can't just play the results of the playoff no matter what. And at the end of the day, Nicole Arbach, I think, said it perfectly, which is, okay, what you do before Selection Sunday or the selection event. I don't know what the I'm sure there's 3 sponsors now. I'm sure that I got to create a show to talk about it. But anyway, whatever you do before the show determines if you deserve to be in, not after. It doesn't matter what happens after. And so at the end of the day, what kills me is that always capitalism benefits those that have money, right? So objectively, this is an Ohio State team that was pretty much the same as last year. And last year, they proved they were not a championship team. This year, we get to watch Ohio State with their great talent that we talked about. They look like the team that they bought and paid for this offseason for a game, okay? So what you end up doing when you expand the playoff is giving more teams chances to look like that. But that doesn't mean that's not rocket science, guys. The reason why we root for these big upsets isn't because we think NIU is better than Notre Dame. It's because it used to mean that ended Notre Dame's season, okay? So when you get a team full of 5 stars at home, like Ohio State, and hand up, I was so wrong about that game. I get it. I owe Ohio State a massive apology. They outclassed Tennessee. But as it started to happen, I went, oh, yeah, this is this team that me and Connor sent there in the offseason and went, it would be a massive disappointment if this team didn't win a natty. With all the things that they did, all the additions that they did with Ross Bjork and everything. This is a team that's playing with freaks. Like, this is a team that has been at the top of the recruiting. And when you give that team 3 chances to lose, as a 2-loss team, they're going to smoke some lesser teams.
We went into this hoping for chaos.
Mm-hmm.
We did not get chaos. And college football and college basketball are 2 different things. It doesn't mean that it's going to end up like this in the first round forever.
Mm-hmm.
It is a reminder that 3 weeks to prepare and, well, 2 weeks, depending on if you played a conference championship or not, and home field advantage with 3 of those 4 games in sub-freezing temperatures. Significant advantage. Really hard to win a game like that. There are not a lot of teams that go on the road and beat top 10 teams. That is what you're
That's
asking.
the other part of it. You have talked about this ad nauseum. It's something that kind of over time has blown my mind where you think about these hostile environments. It's like, no, like we talked about, Georgia barely gets home, night games. Most of these big games are at this point at neutral sites. And so we really forget, and I forgot how hard it is to win in Columbus. We've seen some teams do it, but that factor does make it a lot harder to win on the road. And that's a big difference, to your point, than March Madness, because we're not having these kids go down to, Rupp. That's the other part of it. Maybe if John Calipari got to play at Rupp, he wouldn't be losing to Oakley.
Yeah, seriously. It was, I think, a first round with a lot of takeaways. Remember, this is just the first year of this new format. I think that there was still a clear takeaway that, it's a really good advantage to have home field in the first round. But at the same time, some of these teams that didn't get buys, you saw the injury bug kind of hit them. I thought Texas and Notre Dame both had some pretty key injuries in their first round games, despite the fact that they obviously won convincingly. And, well, I shouldn't say Texas won convincingly. The final score a little bit different than how competitive that game felt at the end. Let's dig into that. I'm sure we'll get to a lot of other bigger picture playoff takeaways with talking about the 2 SEC games here. But let's start with that, because Texas is able to win this game on a night in which I thought Clemson was as impressive as it's been since the 2019 season. Will,
I agree.
Not defensively, they've had much better defenses. It was not a Brent Venables defense, so I guess I should just limit that to the offensive side of the ball. But I truly mean that, and I mean that even though Clemson falls to 0-3 against the SEC this season, and Jim Phillips' tough spin zone that's going to be. SEC fans of 3 lost teams, be mad at Clemson. Clemson got an automatic bid for winning the ACC, even though it went 0-3 against the SEC. We don't have to do the hypotheticals with Clemson. They lost 3 games to different SEC teams this year, and they were told, you are worthy of a spot despite the fact that you have 3 losses. You played in the right conference. That's the thing that you should be mad at if you're talking about expansion. Anyway, we don't need to dig into that any more than we already have. I thought for a minute when Clemson's coming back in the second half and Cade Klubnik is playing maybe as well as he has in his entire career, I thought for a minute that Dabo was about to have a Toby Keith win. Brief moment. And we were all going to be talking about on Saturday, on Sunday, man, how did this Clemson team do this and pull off a feat like that as a 3-loss team?
I will say, too, really quick, I barely get to listen to games on the radio, and I told you I had a situation where I had to go around and do something, and I listened to the audio of Cade Klubnik and, being from Austin and hearing that crowd just
He's from
echoing.
Austin. That wasn't
Yeah.
said. That oh wow, I didn't know that.
Dude, the way they set that up on the radio broadcast was sick. Yeah, he was no. I know they probably said it a ton, but it was just the way that it echoed off of the like you could hear the crowd, you could hear it almost like banging in his head. And exactly to your point, in the beginning of the game, as they walked out, because it didn't last long, it was like, okay, Dabo, like this feels like you're kind of out of tricks. And yeah, to your point, you look at how he played, and it's like, man, this looks like a little bit of that Trevor Lawrence performance. But to your point about Texas, like, you got to feel great because this wasn't some limp, like, Clemson team that they smashed. They had to come back and get this win.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be lost in the shuffle of this because Clemson ends up being a 4-loss team, and the aforementioned record against SEC teams is probably not going to do it justice. But I think it's okay to feel all of those things, and I think Clemson fighting back the way that it did instead of just getting roasted in the second half like it did in the season opener against Georgia. I do think that maybe adds a little bit of validity in a strange way. But after Clemson comes back and makes it a 1-score game early in the fourth quarter, there's like 11 and a half minutes left. Texas offensive line creates that running lane on the left side. Jaden Blue is gone, 77 yards. Texas doesn't look back from there. But the performance from Cade Klubnik to get there against that Texas defense, a Texas defense that we talk about all the time, number one pass defense in college football, 4 passing touchdowns allowed, hadn't allowed more than 204 passing yards to a quarterback all year, 3 passing touchdowns. What does he end up with? Like 330 passing yards in this game. Really, really impressed. And then TJ Moore, my gosh, the Clemson receiver played as well as any Clemson receiver since like freshman Justin Ross.
I was about to say, this really was the Dabo special. It was like, this guy's the future of football.
I mean, they looked the part, and I thought Klubnik was decisive. He was mobile. He was willing to attack that loaded Texas secondary in ways that a lot of teams really haven't. They've said, well, we'd rather run the ball. Clemson didn't have an option. Clemson could run the football because Maffa was still dealing with the shoulder injury, kind of what Dylan Sampson was for Tennessee, where he's available, but then very quickly you realize he's not going to be available, and this is just not going to work for him, which is too bad. But
real quick to your point, man, because that's exactly right, and that just goes to show this should have been, again, a 30 or 40 point blowout by Texas, because like we talked about the physicality, and both of these teams are trying to be physical teams. Yeah, that first drive to kind of second drive for Clemson, they had some of that physicality. They were really gashing like with some of the runs and some of those like kind of swing pass style plays. But the fact that they were unable to get running lanes all night, and they knew that Cade Klubnik was all they had to do, and they knew that TJ Moore was all they had, and they just kept kind of being able to do it, just goes to show that, again, like, really impressive win for Texas, because this game could have been a laugher for Dabo. And to your point, like, it's not exactly a Toby Keith game, but it's
yeah, in a weird way, and that sounds like a moral victory. And it sounds there are people listening to this saying you guys are just gassing up Texas again. This team is not that good. They were kind of exposed with their passing game. Cade Klubnik was the best quarterback that they've seen all year, and they faced Carson Beck. Georgia fans, sorry, but
that's a fact. Yeah,
tell me if I'm wrong, because Klubnik, like I thought, did everything in his power to try and will them back. But I don't necessarily think the takeaway for the Texas defense should be they are fraudulent and they can be had. Now, maybe they're a little bit more vulnerable than what we expected, but you didn't see a slew of missed tackles and coverage busts.
No.
Clemson made plays. Now, they were finding some soft spots in the zone, but I didn't really feel like Texas ever figured out Cade Klubnik, which is why that lead didn't feel like it was impossible to overcome until some of those plays down the stretch. But the strength for Texas ends up being running the football. Man, they got whatever they wanted in the ground game for most of the night. Day, I guess. It's weird when you have those 4 o'clock starts, 3 o'clock local time. I don't know, day, night, whatever, afternoon. On a day in which you have your veteran center, Jake Majors, go down on that blindside block that negated the touchdown on the Clemson pick six, a very pivotal call in that game that I know Clemson fans were very, very upset about. Probably a 50-50 thing that can kind of go either way. Surprised it also wasn't called for targeting at that point. If it was going to be called at all, I thought that could have been, kind of both called if that was the determination. But nonetheless, it's really, really important. And by the way, if that holds, that's different ball game. Clemson makes it 21-14, and instead they end up having to settle for a field goal. And then Texas comes back, gets a touchdown before the break, and it's 28-10. But
Imagine South Carolina fans watching that, by the way. Just got left out of the playoff. Same thing happened to you, Touch. You watch it happen to Clemson. Gotta feel a little sweet. I gotta say, I empathize. The hater in me goes,
imagine South Carolina fans watching a lot of this. Very frustrating. Very frustrating. But yeah, Texas loses two guys on that offensive line, that very decorated offensive line. They lose Majors, they lose Cam Williams, the right tackle. Mm-hmm. And that was knowing that Calvin Banks Jr. was a guy that coming into this, he's working off the ankle injury. We had thought he was going to play. He ends up being able to play and looked like himself. And Texas didn't allow it to matter. They just shuffled those pieces on the offensive line. I thought Trevor Goodspeed was playing so well on the right side at right tackle, filling in, and they just kind of shuffle the pieces and they make it work. They had Blue and Wisner go off for 29 carries, 256 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the ground. Wisner also went down on that play with Williams. It was a weird, typical like Texas behind the line of scrimmage pass play that gets blown up, and Williams was trying to drag Wisner with him, which is illegal. And then Clemson just had a pile of guys that kind of fell on. It was just a recipe for disaster all around. Just about as negative of a play as one can have without turning the football over. And we find out afterwards from Sark that Majors and Wisner were held out down the stretch as kind of a precaution. Williams is getting an MRI. So if you're looking for things that could deter Texas from winning a national championship, maybe that's not going to be quite as significant. It's still
got to pull out another random running back from the closet. Okay.
Seriously.
Hey, son. Yeah, how'd you like to get 100 yards behind 2/5 of our offensive line?
I kept thinking about that. And maybe it was the moment where I think it was Gibson, the true freshman, who came in and ran out of the I formation into the end zone. Or was it did he score, or was that a fourth down conversion? I'm blanking on that play.
Didn't score.
But yeah, didn't score, but it was a fourth down conversion that he picks up. And I'm thinking to myself, God, I remember when we talked in August. Texas, man, this backfield that I was so excited about. CJ Baxter, my leading rusher from the SEC, my predicted leading rusher. They lose Christian Clark. That was a guy that was going to have a real significant role. This could be the type of thing that prevents you from winning a national championship. Time will tell. Could be the strength of a national championship team. It really could. Their backfield, has gotten so much better.
Yeah.
And you would never know that they had these injuries, that they've had this turnover at the position the last 2 years. And it's a testament to what they have built in that foundation, because Clemson couldn't do anything, and Dabo knew it. I mean, that was the only thing that was preventing them, obviously, from being able to pull off this miracle comeback.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I hand up about Ohio State, but this is one that I feel like, our research into Texas, I feel like has really paid off throughout the year, because I feel like they're about to take that 12th man moniker away from A&M, man. They're like,
easy now.
They're an injury away from playing Arch Manning at running back. That's
the Arch stuff didn't work either. That was kind of weird. Like, if there's a knock on Texas's performance besides the defending of Cade Klubnik, Sark got kind of too cute with some of these fourth down things. I was perfectly fine with the 4th and 1 decision to go for it when you're ripping off 6.5 yards per carry and you're getting whatever you want on the ground. But then, of course, they get stuffed there instead of making it a 3-score game. That kind of allows Clemson to be able to have this sense of life, which I don't know how much of a difference that would have made over the course of the game. But Sark kind of admitted afterwards, maybe got a little bit too cute. He had the backup center in and Arch with the botched fumble exchange on 4th down. But you had all that stuff happen, and yet still you look up and Texas ends up winning this game by 14 points. And Ewers plays a game manager role. Those were Sark's words afterwards. He played it pretty well. They said that he wasn't going to be wearing the ankle brace, and then great reporting by Laura Rutledge, who noticed that he was wearing that under his sock when the game started. She asked him about it afterwards, and he's like, yeah, I thought just might as well. It's better to be able to have it than not. I thought that Ewers looked about as mobile as Texas fans could have hoped for.
Right. That's the thing. Like, hey, you're likely, if Texas is going to win a natty or get very far, likely there will be a Quinn Ewers game. I don't expect it to be every game. I expect it to be one.
What do you mean Quinn Ewers game in the good direction or the bad direction?
The good direction. Like, okay. I think there's like one of the, Michigan game from this year, Alabama game from last year in there somewhere bumping around, right? Similar to the Klubnik game we saw. That being said, you'd much rather win like this to just prove that you don't need that game every game, because it's not going to be there, but if this is your average, that dog will hunt.
Yeah, that'll play. That
Mm-hmm.
will. And I like the interception was definitely not on yours. That's just a dropped pass
Yep.
that can't happen. He had a play where he threw a very similar pass where I think it was Wingo who looked like they just was not on the same page as the true freshman. And it could have been a play very similar to the interception that Dalen Everett made in the SEC championship, where he just locked on a guy didn't do what he thought he was going to do, and it's kind of an obvious like what in the world was going on. Had a play that should have been picked off like that, but it was a little bit underthrown. So you kind of look back and you're thinking, well, Ewers did exactly what Sark could have hoped for. The ground game, once you saw that advantage in the first quarter, you knew that you weren't necessarily going to need those downfield shots. Still hit on one of them. That one to Golden was just a ball that by the narrowest of margins he's able to fit in there. And we were texting after that, just love Matthew Golden.
I
Just love
said
that
Golden
guy.
looks about 6'12" on game day, bro.
Dude,
You know, and 2 catches, one of them the loudest to most of the game.
he's big time. He is
Yeah.
definitely big time. And Gunnar Helm, I thought played like Gunnar Helm does, and gets open, finds those soft spots, and Ewers is usually really good targeting him. But I think the takeaway for both teams, Clemson avoided embarrassment.
Yeah.
You know?
Hold on, and I'll say real quick too to just kind of put a bow on this whole thing. Like, okay, just because we have 2 great coaches, again, gosh, people are just so loud online. Just because we have 2 great coaches locked in a great game where there are adjustments and everything, right? So basically, like we said, Clemson's DNA this season has been we're a physical team. We force turnovers. We try to cut down on mistakes. We're not going to air it out for 400 yards. That's usually not been their DNA, right? So the fact that Texas knew that, took that away from them, and through their second option, like I was talking about, was so successful, again, doesn't mean that anyone's fraudulent here. On the other side of it, this is exactly, we can talk about Gunnar Helm, right? There was a moment, again, like I said, I was running to the store real quick, heard it was a big third down for Texas. And it was like, and there's Gunnar Helm. Someone comes up, it's like every time they have turned into this program, right, where their guys just find a way, right? And even if it's not Arch Manning, we're going to try that. And even if it's not this kind of gimmicky route, we're going to try that. And even if it's not, blue, we're going to try white. We're going to try every little thing we can. And eventually something is going to work. And I think that offensively, Sark might be the greatest mind in football kind of as a whole right now. And I know people are saying Andy Reid, all that, man, with a guy like Pat Mahomes, we're getting, it's similar, right? Because just as Andy Reid is not getting the Pat Mahomes he exactly signed up for, I think that the same thing is true with Sark with Ewers. What's up?
That wasn't even a great Sark game by any stretch. He's had much better games in terms of scheming guys open, and he admitted afterwards the 4th down stuff was not good. And that was not a game for the Sark is just this exceptional elite mind.
No, but I'm saying it did work against A&M. Remember that. Like, if it doesn't work against A&M, it's a bad call. If it does, so the fact that something was going to work, the continuance to try things, you know what I'm saying? And that's the key. And again, we can talk about, the Georgia game. They were given a golden opportunity at the end there. Pardon my pun. But point being, when you get this Cade Klubnik, things just change. And it's just that simple. So again, we can't credit the Texas defense. So fundamentally, here we go. This is a defensive team. Check that box, I think. I think, again, if you need a college football quarterback to throw for 400-plus yards to beat you, which it would have taken 500 in this game, good luck. You're not going to see many Joey B's working out there, right? Second thing, it's a running team. I think they showed that, right? And then everything else is just kind of lanyap, as they say, because they accomplished their objectives against Clemson. And, like we said, I don't think we need to leave Clemson out of the field. I think that this is just honestly a pretty good game. Wasn't an all-time classic or anything because Texas handled business.
I love that Texas is certainly flawed, but they could just find different ways over the course of 60 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's not the prettiest thing in the world. And they haven't always been exactly who we thought they were going to be at different moments, but it's kind of the closest game to a shootout that they've played all year. And I don't know that it'll be a shootout against Arizona State. It's an entirely different team to prepare for. If you talk about like strengths, DNA, all those different things, run first, Arizona State's going to be with Scadaboo. He's going to get fed a ton. Arizona State's run defense is much better than Clemson's. That was an obvious Achilles heel for Clemson coming into the year. So it's an entirely new thing to prep for, but with a team that has multiple faces, which I believe Texas does, I am not suddenly feeling worse about Texas making it to the title game because you can just sort of trust them in these non-Georgia games, which just trust them to be able to kind of find what's working and then play to that strength. Will, Sark brought up something that I've kind of been hammering with Texas and its national standing here. And it's going to come off as a little bit of an eye roll comment to say that they were the only team in last year's playoff to make it in this year's playoff, albeit an expanded playoff. The other three teams all have new coaches. That's the point that gets
I
conveniently
mean,
left out.
I guess,
Yeah,
that's kind of the thing, though. It's like, oh, is that Texas's problem?
yeah, it's not. And that's why Sark is able to bring
Yeah.
that up. And Saturday marked Texas's 12th win of the season, second consecutive 12-win season. In program history, Texas has 5 12-win seasons. Sark owns 2 of them. Mac has the other 3.
No, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't to say that everything moving forward is gravy. And this isn't necessarily just about like, oh, this Texas is back and this season's an automatic success. I always talk about championship windows. You think that window is bigger than it actually is. And while I wouldn't sit here and bet against the future of Sark and Austin, I am very aware of how quickly things can change in college football, and I do not want to dismiss that. And I think Texas, with the path that it has, with the path that it was given in the regular season, has a real opportunity with this team in what I believe is a flawed 12-team field. I could go through all these teams and find the flaws. Texas has flaws too. Oregon, not great against the run. Not let up over 200 yards on the ground to Purdue. All right. If you're doing that, I know we're talking about Georgia and how many rushing yards it allowed against UMass, but Oregon, not great against the run either. And we'll see how that plays out. Oregon is a slight dog in that game against Ohio State, a neutral site game, technically played in the Rose Bowl. And your number 1 seed is an underdog in the quarterfinal. So that just kind of speaks to this all over the place nature. Texas and Oregon were the 2 betting favorites in the college football playoff coming into this at plus 360.
Yeah.
And so if you're sitting there in the quarterfinal knowing, hey, we still have all this experience, we're the team that's been in the college football playoff. That's not a bad thing to have working in your favor right now. And Texas certainly has that.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I'll say this too. Like, who was coming back this year for Texas that we were like super excited about? Viewers for sure.
Viewers, Calvin Banks, the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
I already talked about TJ Baxter.
So, yeah.
I wasn't a big Isaiah Bond guy coming into the year. Isaiah Bond doesn't end up playing in this game.
Right.
It was mostly going to be about the new pieces and the transfers. I think they lost their top 5 receivers from last year, but a lot of the excitement was on the defensive side of the ball. Anthony Hill Jr., Jahdae Barron, like those guys were stepping into roles as established players. Michael Taff has stepped up and been phenomenal. He makes the big time hit to kind of close the game out yesterday. They kept saying like the walk-on turned All-American, and so they've had these guys that you become more and more excited about the more you get to watch them play. But you're right, it wasn't like, oh my God, this team is just loaded with these household names in a way that everybody across college football will absolutely know them, outside, of course, of Quinn Ewers, who, as we've mentioned many a time, has been kind of disappointing in just relative to expectations.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of looking at that comment. I'm like, actually, this is kind of a little bit of a floor season for Texas if you think about it, because what is their future? It's Arch Manning. At the end of the day, like, it's not like they have some bum coming in. And so I'm looking at this going, yeah, okay, you could say the coaches switch, but that's kind of the point, is that Texas is 30. And I'm going to make this quick point about Texas. I'm going to get out of here. The things that I'm starting to kind of pick up on as this playoff happens, and this is new for all of us. There's no reason to get on Twitter and pretend like we all understand this, right? Talent, health, location. Okay?
Huge.
Talent, health, location. I'm going to start nailing that. Okay, I say that to say location in this game was in Austin, Texas. They had probably equal or better talent, okay, than Clemson. Their health starting to decline. Now, when we're going there is, I think we've seen, science has proven 18 to 20, I guess 5-year-old kids, if you're Diego Pavia, but most 18 to 22-year-old kids aren't supposed to play this many football games. So there are going to be a lot of these lopsided scores, I think, as we start to add to it. So Texas might be on the end of one of those. And the reason I want to make this point now is just in case it happens or before it happens. Making it back to this playoff is incredibly impressive for Texas with all the attrition and injuries and talent they've lost. And to your point, I think they even have much more going forward. So just because they end up going somewhere and getting embarrassed, it won't be against Arizona State, I don't think. But, just in case, let's say they meet up in Oregon or something, it gets bad for them. I'm looking at this team. I'm looking at the preseason expectations, looking at the product from the field and going, yeah, I think they're only going to get better from here. So hats off to Texas for proving they belong in the playoff and winning their first playoff game. Yeah.
I think you could make the argument maybe unless Oregon runs the table, any other
Mhm.
team that wins the college football playoff, including Texas, if they win, you will say they got some significant breaks.
Yeah.
Texas is at the top of that list with the path
Oh
of
yeah.
the regular season, the path in the playoff. To be a double-digit favorite in your first 2 games, I
Mhm.
will be stunned if they don't end as a double-digit favorite. I think they opened at minus 13 and a half against Arizona State, I want to say.
Yeah.
And that's you have to get these breaks. And as you talk about with health and all those different things,
Mhm.
Oregon is truly the only team where you would look at, and if they just run the table, you bet, yeah. I mean, they made their own luck. They
Mhm.
had to play Ohio State again. They
Mhm.
had to play this team, that team, and the other, and they still ended up going 17-0. I mean, that's or
Jeez.
16-0. That's what we'd be talking about here. And that in itself would be unbelievably impressive. But if you're trying to discredit Texas and saying, well, yeah, look at what they had to do to get here, that's going to be the case for all of these teams. Just
Right.
acknowledge that you're going to have to get some breaks. All right. Tennessee, Ohio State. Holy cow, this game did not go as I thought.
Same.
And I thought Ohio State would win. Claire's got some thoughts she's wearing into the background. Apologies if you can hear that. But even though she didn't watch a second of this game, she was just scoreboard watching big time.
Look, she would have fit right in on Twitter.
She really would have with some of these games. Yeah, there you go. That was just sitting right there. I said it wouldn't surprise me if Ohio State won this game and finished with 21 points. They got to 21 points before Nico completed a pass.
It sure did.
Outside of the second half of the second quarter, yes, I know what I said. When Nico was laying it all on the line because those injuries, they resurfaced for Tennessee, it was just a nightmare.
Yep.
For the Vols. Did it matter that they had the Tennessee takeover with, as Herb Street estimated, 40,000 Tennessee fans in the shoe?
I love Kirk because he knows that his words have huge meaning, and he just continues to say stuff. And
I question how much he knows that at times. Well, we can dig into that a little bit more later.
He keeps finding himself in situations where he's like, "Little old me, Kirk Herbstreit."
Yeah, you guys cared about what I had to say. Kirk sounds tired. We'll just say that. That seemed, maybe it seemed high based on how it looked and sounded after Tennessee. Even those rare moments in which Tennessee did something, it didn't sound like 40,000. Although with the way that it played out, of course, the scoreboard probably had something to do with that. It wasn't like this was back and forth from the start, and you really got a feel for that. But it's still impressive that Herb Street even said that he saw that much orange. Tennessee fans did their part.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's tip of the cap.
It's not your fault, Tennessee fans.
It is not. It is absolutely not. Y'all did everything you possibly could to make
your
that
team
Neyland
fooled
North.
all of us. They fooled you. They fooled me. They fooled Connor. We're all co-losers here.
Yes. Tennessee's roster did not do its part. It's an entirely different offensive game plan for Tennessee if Dylan Sampson is available instead of on the sideline with the hamstring injury, which flared up early on in this game. And in those conditions, it's not all of a sudden just going to get better.
Yeah.
To make matters worse, you lose Squirrel White again. You lose Dante Thornton. They both leave in this game. 5 combined touches for those 3 guys.
That's it.
That was never going to be a winning formula. And my initial fear of Tennessee being too banged up, the intel that I had a couple of weeks ago about how this was probably still going to be a lingering issue, I made the mistake of kind of moving past that a little bit as we heard some of the practice reports. Dylan Sampson saying, I feel as good as I felt all year.
How did I fall for that, Connor? That's never true. It's never true. Why did I think? But we've seen that out of individual players, though. We really have. Where guys have just, like Jalen Waddle played. Like, let's talk about that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, all it would have taken if Sampson had come out and 28 carries for 140 yards with a couple of touchdowns and Tennessee pulls off an upset, we would have, of course, been like, oh, yeah, we should have just trusted him that he was feeling as good as he felt. But obviously, it just did not play out that way. And it ends up being that, look, Tennessee did a great thing by coming back against Vandy. That's a real sentence.
Yeah.
But that game was costly. It was really, really costly. I don't think that if Tennessee is fully healthy, it automatically flips such a lopsided result. So I'm not sitting here saying that. But I'm just saying in terms of making that feel like a truly competitive game where Tennessee can kind of play to its strengths and see what it looks like for 60 minutes, see what it looks like with having all of those visiting fans in Ohio Stadium. They didn't get a chance to do that. And Tennessee is obviously at fault for it, but there's no world in which Josh Heupel was sitting there going, what's a good game plan for us is to give Nico 20 opportunities to run the football.
Yep.
That wasn't the way that he drew it up. And Nico fought. I mean,
that's the so frustrating thing is I was like, here's your X factor. We talked about it's like, oh, Nico needs to run a little bit. I think he had a fine performance with his legs. The thing is, all of his receivers were dead and he couldn't hit anybody. Like, I don't think as a passer he lost this game. I think they just didn't have gentlemen on the field. And buddy, that hit that he took on like the first series or
cracked his helmet.
Cracked his helmet legally in the year of our Lord, almost 2025. When I saw a helmet get cracked, I went,
was it legal? Was it?
Well,
sure?
That's the thing. Everything. Here's the deal. Here's what I would say about that. We saw a classic 8K 120th speed replay on that face mask when Tennessee's defense was playing well. All right, fall fans, here's the part you're waiting for. We saw and I went, that is a pretty soft call in this moment. Now, how are you getting? Because remember, Tennessee had them dead to rights on that first series. Like their defense was playing with their hair on fire. They got a very, in my opinion, stupid face mask call because the guy moved his hand. Like he slapped the quarterback in his face. Well, he immediately goes, oh shoot, face mask, and like moves his down to his collar. It's like, hey, you can't. I know you can't do that, but in a game like this, that shouldn't like determine it. So that's kind of my point is like, how are you going to allow a hit like that and while allowing the face mask? I don't know.
Nothing went right for Tennessee.
Yeah.
And
there was a hold as well, but none of that matters when you lose by that many points. That's the thing. Like Heupel freaking out the defensive holding, he was right to be clear. But if your offense proves they can't move the ball no matter what you do, you're going to have infinite penalties and it doesn't really matter. Yeah,
it's hard to really pick a true strength of Tennessee's performance. Again, the heart of Nico was about all you could really.
That's all they had, which is what we've questioned kind of all year. It's very poetic in a way, right?
Yeah, not even Jermod McCoy, who we talked about coming in, that matchup with Jeremiah Smith, how pivotal that was going to be. Jeremiah Smith won that battle, and played really, really well against Tennessee's stud corner. Wasn't on him as much as I thought early, and then won. I don't know if that was a switch that was made or something like that, but it looked like they were taking advantage of spots when he wasn't on him. And then Will Howard was like, I don't care. I'm still going to go after him. I get Jeremiah Smith in single coverage. I'm going to take that chance. And that will not be on the Jermod McCoy draft reel a year from now. It will not be. But nonetheless, I mean, Tennessee just got pounded. Yeah. Just got absolutely pounded. Ohio State treated the Vols like a group of 5 team. Yep. I was initially going to say that they treated them like Akron. We're not going to say that because of obvious Joe Moorhead reasons. I have a shock collar.
Joe Moorhead has beaten Ohio State, so we can exactly say that.
Joe Moorhead has not beaten Ohio State as a head coach. He has beaten him as a coordinator, let the record show. And I say that as the number one Joe Moorhead spin zone apologist.
I'm not giving that one to James Franklin, Connor. That's Joe Moorhead's win.
That's fair. I like that. But look, should Tennessee have come out with Michigan uniforms instead of doing the shirtless thing pregame, which I didn't hate it. Show you're tough. Show that it's, actually colder in Knoxville at the time of kickoff than it is in Columbus, and people are going to ignore that. Should they have just come out in Michigan uniforms? Maybe not Michigan shirts, because that's trolling, and that would have gotten them even more fired up. But actual Michigan uniforms? Could Tennessee have gone like full rebrand, little maize and blue before? I'm just saying, just throwing out ideas, because nothing Tennessee did in orange worked on Saturday night.
I think they should have picked a GA or like someone who's like 5th string on the depth chart to go get like a tiny flag and just plant it in the corner just so he could get arrested. I think that would have been fire. Carry a guy out in handcuffs, watch the boys go crazy. I think that would have been worth it.
Maybe. I don't know. Could you have dressed up Death in a Michigan shirt just on the sideline there, just looking at Ohio State? That would have been what was it? It was. Gosh, that was a Knicks Pacers thing back in the day. It was Eastern Conference Finals. Go back and watch the Reggie Miller versus the New York Knicks 30 for 30. It's all in there. But they could have taken a page out of that playbook, and that would have worked to just have Death sitting there on the sideline. But yeah, look, here's the issue I have if I'm a Tennessee fan. It's not the fact that Ohio State got to host this playoff game. We already talked about that. Buckeyes beat 2 playoff teams. Tennessee beat 2 FBS teams with a winning record. One of them was Florida, the OT game where they lose Graham Mertz. Okay, we don't need to go back down that road again. If I'm a Tennessee fan and I want to look inward and I want to really look at the overarching issue that is preventing Tennessee from getting into tier 1. Tennessee's in tier 2 right now. It's not
Right.
tier 1. It's the road record. Josh Heupel is now 8-10 in true road games at Tennessee. Remember the other day how we talked about how the best road win of the Heupel era was at LSU in 2022, kind of before Jaden Daniels became Jaden Daniels, before that LSU offense took off, and they end up winning the SEC West that year.
Tennessee smoked us there. I want to be clear.
Smoked them.
But
Dominant.
that kind of stands alone.
Yes. Since that day in Death Valley, Tennessee's 4-8 in true road games. 7 of those 8 losses were by at least 13 points. And the one that wasn't was the game in Arkansas this year. 2 of those 4 true road wins that Tennessee had since that game at LSU, Tennessee didn't leave the state at Vandy. Not 40,000 Tennessee fans at that game. Could only have 28,000. I think it was 29,000 capacity at Vandy this year with the construction. But there was a lot of Tennessee fans at 2 of those games and probably didn't feel like much of a road game. Okay? I thought the Oklahoma game this year, where Tennessee does go on the road, and it wins that game in which it silences a visiting crowd, and you have the Heupel reunion. I thought that was the beginning of moving past that. And it felt so significant at the time. We could go back and listen to all the things we said. Tennessee has championship DNA after that game. I think that was a fair takeaway in that moment. But little did we know after that game, Tennessee would not win another game outside of the state of Tennessee. That's rough.
Yeah.
And that's on Heupel. Maybe some will say it's on Tim Banks, some of the defensive performances in these games. Everybody's going to continue to talk about South Carolina 22, about how that ended Tennessee's playoff run. I totally get it. You could find different spots where different things are to blame. It's 3 different starting quarterbacks that are part of that 4-8 stretch. But it's on Heupel. He's done awesome things, and I'm not going to discredit that, okay? 30 wins in the last 3 years, multiple Bama wins, multiple Florida wins. It's the best 3-year stretch of football for Tennessee since 96 through 98. That's the last 2 years of Peyton Manning at a national championship season. You know this.
You know what? Also, I realized this is the first year that Tennessee provably had a better season than Alabama that I can remember.
I would say 22 is still better because you had the same record. You had the same record, and you beat them in the head-to-head.
So you're right about that, but the way their year ended was so disappointing, and Bama kind of finished on a high note where the guys like, you know, I think this
Tennessee
like
won the bowl game. Tennessee won a New Year's Six bowl as well.
you're right, but in terms of like, you know, it was still a disappointing season. I think this was a good season for Tennessee. I think overall, you know, can't beat Ohio State. I don't know.
It is a good season, and we're doing this because we're asking the question that needs to be asked. What's gonna take Tennessee to that next level? You know, like what's going to be the thing that allows them to go in and win a game like this, which has totally eluded them in the last 2 decades. And that's why we brought up in the pregame, Tennessee has not won a true road game against an AP top 10 team since 2006 at number 10 Georgia. They haven't won a game, I think it's post-October, a true road game against an AP top 10 team since 2003. I mean, 21 years we're talking about. And that's a difficult thing to overcome. Because those are the games in which we go, dang, that team can win a national championship. That's why we were saying those things when you did that at Oklahoma, right? When Oklahoma's number 15 in the country at the time, we think they're destined for a different season. We know how that plays out. But that's going to be the toughest pill to swallow this offseason, despite the fact that you get to talk about Nico coming back. Do we want to have that conversation now?
After this one point, I do want to say this about Tennessee. Like, this has been such a fascinating team to watch. Look, Heupel's made it interesting, and I think that, you know, to his credit, he has been able to change some things around. Talk about adjustments. I don't exactly think he did an amazing job of this one, but I'll say it this way. What has become clear to me with this offense is, and again, this is all working theory because this offense tends to just prove me wrong over and over again, but I think that they got the physicality part of it figured out this year as far as get the big offensive line, get the physical running back. Okay, cool. If your offense is going to be predicated on your receivers being that wide, you need to have 2 things. Basically, you need frozen ropes. You need a quarterback who is able to, on time, confidently with force, deliver the football, you know, on these 30-yard ropes that offense requires. And you also need receivers who can beat guys one-on-one. You
Yeah.
need receivers that can actively make plays because it's going to take so much time to get the ball out to those receivers that they need to be up in a position. And in 2022, again, they had 3 great receivers, and they had a quarterback who, while he didn't have like elite arm strength, he was able to, as we talked about, make things happen with his legs to where if he wasn't able to teleport the ball across the field, he could just take off to where guys were a lot more open. So I think that now we're starting to see, okay, Amaliava, and that's why it's a segue into him. Is he the guy we still don't exactly know? We need to see confidence out of him. We need to see him win matchups with his arm. We saw him do it a little bit with his legs, even after taking that hit. And like I said, I'm not going to say this game is on him. I think they just didn't have the horses, but they need to get those horses if they're going to be taken seriously.
You're going to have a lot of new pieces around Nico next year.
Mm-hmm. They need to hit the portal. Like.
They will. They've already they lost what I think 4 scholarship receivers to the portal. They will replenish. They have to. You're going to lose some of your key players in the passing game. There's no doubt about it. What do we really know about Nico? That's what I find myself asking.
It's a mystery box.
He kind of is. And I didn't expect that to be the takeaway at the end of his first season as a starter, which it is the end of his first season as a starter as a redshirt freshman. And there's some grace that deserves to be shown there. Okay. He went to the college football playoff, right? And led that team to a 10-2 regular season. We're not dismissing that. Okay. There was real fight shown from him on Saturday, inspiring, rally the troops type moments. And when he does the LeBron silencer, and you're thinking, is Nico turning into like that dude right now? And then the game plays out the way that it does. And he did not have the surroundings on the outside to be able to consistently string scoring drives together against the number 1 scoring defense in college football on the road. Like, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like if he was the dude, he would have won that game. That's not what I'm saying. You saw in that game, no Samson, no chance. If Nico didn't have the NIL conversation, the hype as a top 10 recruit, the NCAA case, I think there'd be some different conversations about him than what they will be this offseason.
Okay.
I believe this offseason that he will be hyped as a top 5 quarterback in returning in the sport. I don't think I am there yet with Nico. And it's not to say that he can't become that. I just think based on what we have seen from him so far, maybe some of it's because of what he's been asked to do and what they realized was going to work with this Tennessee team, a Tennessee team that felt like it was just doing whatever it could to just make it into the playoff by any means necessary. And that meant feeding Dylan Sampson the way that they did. I think he's more surroundings dependent than someone like DJ Lagway. That's going to ruffle Tennessee fans. And maybe he's going to look better with his surroundings next year than DJ Lagway will. I won't dismiss that possibility. But I threw out this poll on Twitter on Friday in the middle of Florida's bowl game. So this is before Tennessee plays Ohio State, and we see that game from Nico. But I threw out the question of which SEC quarterback would you want for next year between DJ Lagway, Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, and Nico. Those guys are going to be
groups. That's kind of unfair to Nico.
I didn't do that because I wanted to see who the winner was. I didn't think it would be that significant. Arch ends up winning only with 32.2% of the vote. Sellers had 29.7% of the vote. Lagway had 26.8% of the vote. So really 5.5% in a 239 vote poll was what separated those guys. And a lot of that comes down to which fan bases follow me on Twitter. So I'm not going to read too much into that. I wanted to see how far behind Nico would be compared to those 3. And that's why I asked that question. Because I didn't think the non-Tennessee fans would default to he's the quarterback in the playoff and those 3 are not starting for teams in the playoff. Nico only had 11.3% of the vote, a very distant 4th among that group. And this sounds like I'm dogging him, but I'm not. This was the defining guy of the Heupel era. And maybe Saturday was a key moment for him in the grand scheme of things. Maybe we'll look back on this and what he was asked to do in those moments when Tennessee's just dropping guys like flies. And we'll look back on that game at Ohio State and say, you know what? Nico kind of grew up in that losing effort. And maybe he needed to take it on the chin that way and have this moment of figuring out who he is. Maybe he will. But I just wonder if his stock is slightly down going into next year compared to where Tennessee fans will tell you that it's going to be because they know this is the defining guy of the Heupel era.
That's such an interesting question because Lagway is one of the few that I would guarantee has the arm strength to effectively run a vertical wide offense like this. Although to be clear, Joe Milton also had arm strength and didn't look great. I would actually love to see like from the jump, not what we see now, but Amaliava in Florida system and Lagway in Heupel system.
That's funny.
Simply because Billy wants a running quarterback. And he doesn't have one. He is a guy who throws missiles.
Lagway's going to run. Lagway's going to run. When he's fully healthy, he will run more.
He just doesn't really have that on tape. You know what I'm saying? He has the tape of the number one quarterback prospect who's just bigger and a little bit more athletic than everyone, but he's not shown to be a guy who's like first choice or wants to be mobile. It's just like, oh, well, that guy is going to be an accountant. He can't tackle me. Like that's usually with his high school. Then he got in the apparatus, you know. So that's all I'm saying is that like it would be fascinating to watch these guys in each other's systems. I can't guarantee, like I said, that arm strength would create productivity in this Tennessee offense because you need a couple of things. I'll say it like this too, right? This sounds like a crazy, cerebral, like reading too much into it, but hear me out, okay? The criticism about Amaliava is going to be, to your point about, oh, the NIL, you know, people are going to throw around, he's not living up to it. And the visual is a writer's dream where you get, you know, the Cali kid, he's out in the cold, you can see his breath. I don't want this performance to be lost on this.
This is the wrong game to make that determination. It really is. Like when I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to say that as well, and it's worth remembering. This is not the game to determine Nico's a bust. If that is your takeaway, you're watching this through a different lens, and you're not asking the bigger picture questions about him.
Oh, yes. And listen, the reason why sometimes I will take things back to LSU, number one, is to not insult another fan base when I'm being negative. Number two is that LSU has had some weird hopium things work out for them, i.e. transfer quarterbacks. And I'll tell it to you like this, okay? You don't, like the media or the conversation around Tennessee is going to turn it into Amaliava is unserious. Amaliava needs to be a fiery leader. He needs to be out there yelling at people like Tom Brady, da-da-da. Watching Jaden Daniels make this jump from year one to year two, he never turned into that guy.
He really did.
You know what he turned into? Was a guy that had fun. And I think that Amaliava does not need to be screaming at people on the sidelines. He does not need to be this, like, you know, jarhead drill sergeant. He needs to get out there and do what Jaden Daniels did, which was have fun. He needs to be able to trust himself to throw this ball in the rope. Hey, he was just as big, if not a little bit bigger of a recruit as Jaden Daniels. If he sets his feet and is decisive with the ball, he has an NFL arm, okay? So at the end of the day, they need, now again, what did Jaden Daniels have? 2 first-round receivers. You got to get this guy some help, okay? But at the end of the day, he doesn't need to be in there. You don't need to micromanage him anymore. I think micromanage him is what's put him here. You need to just let him rip it. You need to say, hey, look here, Nico. We don't know what else we have with this offense. Okay, buddy, this is going to be your offense. There are certain situations where giving your quarterback power makes a lot of sense. We kind of saw it this year. Alabama needed to do that, you know, based on their receiver situation, and it didn't go great for them, but it was still the right decision. I think this team is going to go exactly as far as Amaliava is, and you saw this. This is kind of before you saw yourself as an Orlando resident, but we always heard about this during the T-Mac era, where people would look at T-Mac and be like, he's not serious. He's not locked in. And the Magic Risers go, this guy's playing 40 minutes a game. Yeah, he's got kind of sleepy eyes. Yeah,
he's sleepy eyes. That's what it is.
He's got,
I'm the biggest T-Mac fan.
Right.
Horace Grant and T-Mac are my 2 favorite basketball players of all time. So, I remember that very, very, very well.
Yes, that's exactly what I feel right now. It's like this guy led the league in scoring. He's taking 30 shots a game. He's playing 40 minutes. Yeah, he's not locked in on every defensive possession. He's 6'8". You're not supposed to do that and play both ways. He's not LeBron, you know? So point being, like, that's what I feel about Amaliava is let's not ruin him and try to turn him into some, like, cosplayer, like our boy in Nebraska, Raiola, who's just like, I'm the best quarterback. This is what Tom Brady would do today. No, let him be him. And if you see a quarterback who plays free next year, you're going to see a championship contender in Tennessee. That's it.
Yeah, I'm not out on Nico. I don't want this to make it seem like I'm out on him. I just have more questions about him and his upside coming into this offseason than I thought I would. And that'll be a conversation that we'll talk about a lot throughout this offseason. So yeah, it ends up being just a night to forget for Tennessee, and for Ohio State, it's the night that they could have dreamed of. This is exactly the type of performance that Ohio State fans hoped they would see after the Michigan embarrassment. And Ryan Day felt so good that he was winking at Jack Sawyer at the end of this game.
Those spicy whites, they came to play for Ohio State.
Interesting whites, that's what they say, right?
Yeah, they were sprinkling pepper on there. It was spicy.
I will say, didn't have a dog in this fight.
Mhm.
And I would have loved the Tennessee Oregon matchup, the Dante Thornton Bowl. It would have been.
Mhm.
I do love though that we're getting a rematch of one of the best games of the year. If I'm just
Mhm.
being objective about it, Tennessee fans, I'm not here to hate. It would have, trust me, I would have been very excited to be able to see what Tennessee looked like if it could have, found a way to get through this game with the injuries and stuff like that. But that is a positive of the 12-team playoff, is that we can get a fun rematch like Oregon, Ohio State, and get to see what that's going to look like. So for just college football as a whole, Tennessee might have helped helped our overall psyche after that opening weekend of the playoff. But yes, it was just a nightmare day for Tennessee that it turned out to be. Okay, quarterfinal field. It is set. New Year's Eve, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Penn State, Boise State, Fiesta Bowl. Fingers crossed. Ashton Genty against the Penn State defense is going to be fun. Mercy to that Penn State defense. Frustrate Kevin Jennings. Holy cow. Not sure if the result would have changed if Bryson DeChambeau and those SMU boosters could have gotten off at the correct airplane, and if they could have just been taken to Happy Valley on time. Don't know if that was Kevin Jennings was like, where are all my people at? He only saw people that were, not on his side and just threw it all to them. Whatever. That is a really interesting matchup. I picked Boise State to win that matchup. My James Franklin skepticism, annoyance certainly didn't play a part in that at all. So yeah, we're gonna get that on New Year's Eve, and then New Year's Day. It has potential, Will. It has potential to be one of the best days of football that we have ever had in bowl season. Okay, It's on the table. 1:00 Eastern. Texas, Arizona State in the Peach Bowl. I don't think I'm going to be there for that. I'd initially thought about possibly being there for that. Doesn't look like I'm going to be making that trip. Moving pieces at home, determining that with the work schedules and stuff like that. 5 p.m., Ohio State, Oregon in the Rose Bowl. A game that even college football purists, you're going to look at that game and go, all right, this is pretty awesome that we're getting this. Even though it's a quarterfinal matchup, this is still pretty cool. And then 8:45 in the Big Easy, Notre Dame, Georgia, Sugar Bowl. Gosh, that game's going to finish late. Well,
We've ended up in exactly the situation that we talked about, where like both of these teams, like Louisiana is closer to Texas.
Yeah, that is weird that it worked out like that.
Oh,
yeah, it's strange. That
adopt Connor's idea about letting them draft. You've just cost people money for no reason. You've made your crowd worse. What are we doing here?
Yeah. Listen, throw it out to Gary Silkin. We'll see if it can have any sort of weight moving forward. But
Georgia fans are happy to avoid Atlanta, I think.
I don't know. I think he'd still rather play in Atlanta. I think they'd still rather play Notre Dame in Atlanta. But, speaking of that matchup, the amount of pushback I had on Friday night when I said after Notre Dame beats Indiana, beat them like a drum, beat them way more than 10 points. Okay, they did. I said I think a takeaway is Notre Dame's going to be an incredibly difficult matchup for Georgia. And the amount of Georgia people that I had coming out being like, no. You're crazy. What did you watch that told you that? I'm like, did you not? I understand you can dismiss it because it's Indiana. But we're pretending like Georgia, who will be starting Gunnar Stockton, has been just this offensive juggernaut. It has not. It has a passing game that has struggled at times against better defenses. And if you're telling me that they won't struggle against Notre Dame, they definitely won't at all. And I'm still picking Georgia to win the game. I picked Georgia to win a national championship here. Then tell me, like, what did Georgia have an incredibly difficult time against Georgia Tech? Yeah, it took 8 overtimes. What about Georgia Tech and Notre Dame is that different? Ask yourself that.
Some polish.
Colors are the same.
Yeah, you just polish up the dome.
Yeah.
There's some WD-40 out there.
Notre Dame is putting the name on the uniforms in the playoff.
How about the first Notre Dame home game not on NBC since 1990? That was crazy.
Is that right?
That was what they said on the broadcast. This world's changing.
Wait a minute.
Think about that.
Is that really true?
That's what they said, because every big game they played has been on one of the other deals. It's a neutral site.
Man, that's crazy. Welcome to the new age.
Yep.
wearing Sean McDonough at the end of that game. Oh golly. Sean McDonough is just dogging the Big Ten. Big Ten fans did not like them some Sean McDonough at the end
It
of
was
that
fun
one.
when it happened to them, but it started happening to us for Tennessee. I was like, hold on, this is
Oh.
oh, I must be nice here.
Ain't no fun when the rabbits got the gun. Golly.
I love that. That's a good throwback. I forgot if it was Wade or LeBron that said that. That was good.
Yeah. But I threw out this idea thinking I'd have at least some Georgia fans be like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Notre Dame runs the football extremely well. That's what they've been doing. Jeremiah Love is just such a great player. The 98-yard touchdown run. I was actually I ran to the bedroom to charge Lauren's phone, and then Notre Dame rips up a 98-yard touchdown run. I'm like, all right, yep, it's gonna be that kind of night. And I'm kind of amazed that Georgia fans have this unbelievable confidence that the matchup itself, like maybe I'm looking at this a bit too practically, but my only point was that Notre Dame secondary is absolutely legit. The blitz packages are going to be on point, and they run the football extremely well. And Georgia hasn't really tackled that well for a Kirby Smart coach team. And if it's a 60-minute game, it will not surprise me. I still think Georgia's going to win. Vegas has a 1.5 point spread on this game. and you would have thought that I predicted Notre Dame to win as like a 15-point underdog or something. But yeah, I get it. I guess it comes to the territory when you win 2 out of the last 3 national championships.
I think it's kind of this simple, right? I'm going to make a stupid point, then I'm going to make a logical one. So I don't know if you guys played the new NCAA game, but one thing that I saw in the preseason was you scheduled Notre Dame, and they have these like 4 they have stars under them defensive linemen. And I remember joking at the time, oh yeah, preseason Notre Dame's undefeated. Da da da. I feel like I saw those digital gentlemen show up against Indiana, and that's what I'd be a little bit worried about is the fact that Notre Dame has proven that this year, and again, I owe them an apology. I said Indiana would have a chance this one. I even said Indiana could win this game, so they would win this game. I'll be honest with you. And so they really made a little bit of believer out of me from a physicality standpoint where it comes, and again, it won't be out in the cold. So what do we say? Talent, health, location.
Huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of those things are not going to be the same with Georgia. Like, to be clear, like talent-wise, Georgia is at least equal to them, right? We talk about it. Backup quarterback really does matter.
Georgia's got more talent. I'll go on the record and say Georgia's got more talent than Notre Dame. I don't want to let that slide. Georgia fans will get mad at me if I let that slide.
See, but here's the deal, man. At this point, and Carson Beck is a guy that, since I'm a hater, I kind of picked up on it early. You'd almost rather, we've gotten the worst, like the bad Gunnar Stockton pick. I don't think we'll ever see a pick that bad at a Gunnar Stockton again. At the end of the SEC champion. I mean, that was
by a human being or by Gunnar Stockton?
By Gunnar Stockton. I'm sure Max Johnson's bumping around there somewhere, buddy. He'll throw it for Rice and try to throw the ball with his left big toe. Don't you worry about it. Anyway, so point being, that was like the worst pick I've ever seen from like a backup in that situation. So that's perfect for Kirby because they won the game. It was a coachable moment. So I would almost rather have a backup quarterback that I know I got that. Now, on the other end, Notre Dame knows they can pin back their ears, but I don't think Gunnar Stockton's going to have the Carson Beck 3 turnover game. I just don't think backup quarterbacks are allowed to do that the way starters are. So I say that to say, it is completely a logical thing, Connor, for you to say, okay, Notre Dame is built to have these star defensive linemen. They are built to have, this physical defense. They are built to crowd the line of scrimmage and push you around. And Georgia has ETN, and they have a boy Cash, and they have some of those guys, but they don't exactly have a Swift. And so point being, big-time ETN game. We talked about that in the SEC championship game. He showed up in these big games over and over and over again. It's a specific player I need something from. It's not the Georgia rush attack because I don't need Stockton to be doing that too. I don't need a rotating stable. I need a guy who can make those guys miss. And from Stockton, you need to keep the defense kind of on its heels. So point being, I say that to say I agree with you. Notre Dame is kind of a nightmare matchup in the way that they're built if you have a backup quarterback because they want to play football like it's kind of old school, and they are great at running the ball and shortening the game. You know what I'm saying? So if you do make a mistake, it could be bad. So I think that Georgia's going to win this game. I'm right there with you. But at the same time, I think it's at this point foolish to disrespect a Notre Dame team that has overcome that NIU loss, that their run game, we sure miss them at LSU. Mike Denbrock's run scheme has been awesome. They had the 2 backs they can get off. So I think that's the key is that we saw that speed. Yeah, we saw some kind of weird plays, a little bit of bad tackling from Indiana. You get that feeling where, a ball carrier is near a couple of guys and you go like, okay, well, this play should logically go here. And it felt like during the Indiana game, every play was 4 and 5 yards past that. I don't think it's going to be the case with Georgia, and Georgia's a smart team. But I will say, like, this is a team that I wouldn't discount because I sure did, and they made me look silly.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of teams left in the field that I would look at and go, that would be a better matchup for Georgia than Notre Dame.
Right.
You know, and I think that maybe the recent history wherein, by the way, Notre Dame and Georgia played competitive football games.
Yeah.
Okay. They played competitive football games in what was it, 17 and 19? Was it 19? Yeah, it was 19, the game in Athens. And I just would not be overlooking it. But I get it. That's what fans are going to do. That's the natural takeaway. All the hypotheticals, good that it's not a hypothetical and we get to actually see these two teams play. I'm hoping that the quarterfinal is going to deliver. We just need to remember that if it does, that the takeaway will be, well, 8 was the number we should have moved to, not 12. 12 was ridiculous. We trimmed the fat, got rid of the teams that didn't belong. Look.
Man, you widen the field. It's again, I know we've talked about it ad nauseum, but it's just so funny. It's like you literally, really quick, I meant to say this earlier. You know what this playoff thing reminds me of? You've been here managing a fantasy football league. Because it's like, all right, guys, we want 2 keepers. And it's like, oh my God, 2 keepers. And then people are like, well, I want 3. Wait, last year we expanded to 2. Now I want 3. It's like, this is why as a commissioner, sometimes you got to be like, guys, one keeper. We're done a month before. Get the names in. I'm done with you because you give your fantasy league a little thing. Can we have an IR spot? Can we have 2 IR spots? Can we keep our IR spots?
You will never make everyone happy. And I say that as someone who's been managing our fantasy football league, our keeper league for 13 years. By the way, nobody cares about this. In our family fantasy football league, wherein Lauren has won 2 of the last 3 or 2 of the last 4 titles. Wow. Lauren has started off 14-0 in our league. And guess who faces her in the semifinals? Your boy. Yeah, it'll be an interesting Sunday in our household. A lot riding on it. Let's just say it wouldn't be the worst thing if I lost.
Hey, when you're doing your last minute subs, are you kind of like, maybe I'll go with my second instinct?
It's a win-win and also a lose-lose, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about that. Plan for this week. We are recording on the 26th, so that is Thursday. I am hoping to publish live that day. We'll see if we can make that happen. That is the goal. It's a weird week with how this breaks down. Christmas on a Wednesday is kind of worst case scenario for how I wanted to be able to record. Because
Christmas on a Wednesday kind of sucks. I thought it'd be cool to get the week off, but everyone's like half working, and it's
it's a very unproductive time in the American workforce, needless to say.
I'm getting like meeting requests, and I'm like, anyway.
Yeah, you're like, oh, you got to get everything done Monday. Can I ask? And then
but you feel bad for like getting collaboration from people. Anyway, people like us are like going because it's like, are you off or are you on? Just let me know.
Yeah, and I felt weird asking like, is Thursday okay? The 26th? Are you going to be not traveling and stuff? But obviously, if it were set up well, we would be recording on Tuesday or Wednesday, but that can't happen. We're not going to record on Christmas Eve. We're not going to record on Christmas, of course. So the plan is to preview all of those SEC bowls with a pod that will drop either late Thursday or early Friday. That is what we will do. That is how we will play this out. So we will have a lot to be able to get to. Maybe we'll recap the Florida Bowl victory over Tulane, a game in which if you didn't watch it, don't worry, you're good. It was a bit of a mess, but Florida ended up winning that convincingly. Maybe we'll find time to be able to recap that as well. But we will preview all those other bowl games. Bowl games matter. We are a believer in that. Not all bowl games matter.
Florida game, I'll give you a recap. They had one of the funniest scoring plays I've ever seen. So just go look up Florida touchdown on Twitter. I'm sure you'll find it. Also, they beat them so badly that Marco Rubio's son scored. So
how about that? Okay. I did not have that note.
So that's pretty much all you need to know. Congrats, Florida. On your 8 wins. You did it. Like genuinely, you beat that schedule.
Desmond Watson also that game. The Desmond Watson statue, we now have a foundation for it. So that's good as well. I think that's a recap. Maybe that's a recap.
I actually had fun watching the highlights of that game. It was very funny.
Yeah. All right. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at SatDownSouth, at CJ Rivera, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.